Well, hello, and welcome to Gallifrey's Most Wanted, the Tom Baker years. Jason from Doctor Who Literature and Trap One is joining me, and we're going to talk Tom Baker. Say hi, Jason.
Hello, Ross, or as Tom Baker would say, what?
I asked him to do this one because we have a similar Doctor Who origin story. Because we are both. How old are you, Jason?
I am going to be 50 in a year and a half, which is a horrible way of saying that I'm 48 and still in my mid-40s.
Yeah, well, it's like the time when I said, Vic, when I was 50, I turned 50, and I said, it sucks being middle-aged. And Vic turned to me and said, you're not living to fucking 100. I was like, yeah, you're right. I'm not. It's like my wife goes, do any of your college stories don't involve sex, drugs, or alcohol? And I went, no, not really. It was the 80s. I went to college in 83. It was punk rock. It was awesome. But we're going to talk Tom Baker because we are both children of the BBC, not the BBC, the PBS, watching him on PBS, which is a very American way to be indoctrinated into Doctor Who. And I'll start with mine. BBC was later for me, or PBS was later for me. I got in Baltimore, on Channel 45. I lived close enough to the Potomac River in Virginia that we got Baltimore channels as well as DC ones. And we had like 8 or 9 public broadcasting because we had Northern Virginia had 2, Maryland had 4 or 5 we could get, So, but we got the Time Life and then the Lionheart episodic versions on Channel 45. It was every afternoon. There were 2 episodes, and they had the introductions and tag outs by Howard Da Silva from 1776 and the Kentuckian, an American actor. Do a recap because they said Americans are stupid, and we're going to have to remind them what the thing they just watched 30 seconds ago was. Because most places were doing what 45 did, was show it as an hour block. Because it was an even, every story was an even number, so you could do an hour and fill it. So that's how I got it. And then right before I left for college, Howard University, I think it was Howard, it was either Howard or Maryland Public Broadcasting, bought the omnibus versions of everything. And my brother taped them for me. And then I had 2 VCRs in my apartment, so he gave me the box. And I sat down there, and I figured out which ones would fit on a tape. I wrote. I'm looking at my episode guide right here. I still have the listing of what VHS tape all the stories were on, including when I started getting reconstructions, sending, putting in the mail. But that's how I saw them. I saw them as movie formats. I didn't see the episodic ones until the VHS came out for a lot of them, for most of them, because we saw episodic through Invasion of Time. That's what Channel 45 had, was Robot through Invasion of Time. So when Howard got it, they didn't have everything the first time through. They just had all of Tom Baker. And then about halfway through the second time or something, if I'm remembering it right, I think the next time through they had bought in 2 years of Peter Davison or something. And then, so I saw John Pertwee last, because that's the way it was, and that was, and it was always an omnibus form, very badly edited. What was your story? Similar?
So similar. I was a little too young for the Time Life. We had Channel 9, WOR, out of Secaucus, which was a superstation. And in New York, they were most known for carrying Mets games. So I spent most of the late 70s and early 80s watching the Mets on Channel 9, unaware that they had Doctor Who on Saturday mornings. My school friends, I'm 11 years old at the time, tipped me off to Doctor Who, which at this point was on Channel 21, WLIW. That was Long Island PBS, about
Okay.
more of which later. Our cable system gave you a flipper with 2 rows of buttons, and the top row was channels 2 through 16, and the
I
bottom
remember
was
those things.
17 through 31.
They were like a calculator, like an old Texas Instrument calculator.
A big brown box with beige tape, and then you had a long, thick brown wire going to the TV, and you had to carry it around with you. And, of course, good luck getting it out of my father's hands. But when I got to watch TV myself, I'm able to get the buttons. So Channel 21, next to that is Channel 22, Nickelodeon. 1984, I am watching Nickelodeon more than anything else. 7 p.m., all I want to watch is their Canadian import. You can't do that on television.
I've watched
And my two friends, John and Stephen, who are still friends of mine today and follow my podcast, believe it or not, the literature one, they said, you must watch Doctor Who. You're going to love it. You're a Star Trek guy. You're going to love this. And, of course, if somebody tells me that I'm going to love something, I just don't pay attention, and I've got to find it on my own. You can't tell me what to watch. I've always had a problem. So for months, they're telling me to watch Doctor Who, and I'm just not doing it. Finally, I flip over one night. There was a bad rerun of You Can't Do That on Television on 22. So I flip over to 21, and I catch the first. It was part 1 of Time Flight, I figured out later. It's about 90 seconds in the middle. It's a scene that starts in the Concorde cockpit, and then it features Peter Davison in the hold climbing into the TARDIS. I had no idea what was going on, and after 90 seconds, I report back to my friends, yeah, watched it, didn't like it, sorry, too bad, so sad. And they said, no, you've got to give it a real chance. A week later, I turned back, and it's Arc of Infinity Part 2, because Channel 21 at the time is doing 1 episode a night from 7 o'clock to 7:25, dinner hour. So I excuse myself from the dinner table, go downstairs, turn on about halfway through Arc of Infinity Part 2, and you get to the cliffhanger where the Doctor is disintegrated, or whatever it was, by the Time Lords, and Nyssa turns to the camera in tears. You know, you and Jeff are always saying, never talk bad about a Doctor Who story, because every story is somebody's first.
Yeah, it's a gateway.
The moment that hooked me is Arc of Infinity Part 2, and if you were to get 1,000 fans together and ask them what is the moment they became fans, I'm the only one whose answer is going to be the Arc of Infinity Part 2 cliffhanger, but that's what did it for me.
Really? That's why I like to hear these stories, because it's interesting. Because I was, and we'll talk about this later, my attitude toward Tom Baker was, petulant on my part. I don't like being told who's the best. And I was, when I really became an uber fan, like in my 20s, I got the magazines. When I went away to college, the comic shop I worked at gave me all the Target books that they had, one of each, as a going away present, stuff like that. And I bought the magazine from the first issue because it had, I didn't know who Dave Gibbons was, but I was like, what the hell is this stuff? It's gorgeous. I just covered Brave and the Bold 200, Batman, Silver Age Batman and Golden Age Batman, parallel stories, and it's Gibbons, and it's gorgeous. He's a genius. But my thing with Baker was everybody goes, oh, Tom Baker, it's the guy with the scarf, because I became one of those people who's like, no, because I got sucked into the magazine and the little episode guides. Like I've been selling off my weeklies and monthlies, but I kept 50 because that has notes in it from me, because that was my first episode guide.
Oh, wow.
So I was kind of going back, I want to see this stuff. So because I'm at that completist, and since I couldn't see it, and then Davison came along, and I went, oh, he's going to be my Doctor, because he's the first new Doctor I get to see. So, and he was my Doctor until Matt Smith. And then I was like, sorry, Pete. I'm going to go with this new guy, this fresh model. But I devoured Tom Baker, and I watched it over and over and over again, and I'm a huge fan of the Hinchcliffe Holmes era, for just steady quality, steady, consistent, good shows. I think it is probably the tightest several seasons in the history of the show, even modern Who. It's 4 solid years with almost no bad episodes, no bad stories. So what's your feeling on early Tom Baker?
If you go back to the 2014 DWM poll, and it lists every Doctor Who story from...
Is that the first 200 stories up through City of Death, City of whatever, that's One in the Sand? pick?
No, that was the 2009 poll.
So, okay.
The 2009 polls were Caves is number 1 and Twin Dilemma is number 200. That was the Mighty 200.
Okay.
The 2014 poll is the 50th anniversary poll.
Oh,
It
okay.
goes in order. If you look at the top 22 stories, 8 of those stories are Hinchcliffe. All right?
Mm-hmm.
Hinchcliffe only did 16. That means 8 of his 16, literally half his output, 3 years, is among the top 22 Doctor Who stories of all time out of 241.
And I won't argue with that. People, I think we reevaluate art, and I say that constantly in the podcast because it does. It's, I'm viewing it, you're not viewing it in a vacuum. You've changed, your life changed. What's going on in the world that moment? When you watch something, it changes. But I listen to Flight Through Entirety, and the guys bring out a thing is Holmes really doesn't like women. Not a lot of women in his stories, other than the companion. And I don't think he doesn't like women. I just think he only writes what he knows. And there is unintentional misogyny in culture, especially in the 1970s. I don't think it's Holmes is a sexist. I mean, he was a pretty liberal person. He's like probably more liberal than me, and I'm pretty damn liberal. But yeah, I think they're great, and I'm a huge Sarah Jane. She's still my favorite companion, and she always will be. I don't think anybody can take her place in my heart. There are 2 people Vic had to call me when they passed to see if I was all right. One was Levon Helm, and the other is Elizabeth Sladen.
The band and Sarah Jane.
Yeah,
that's a good combination.
Yeah. Well, someone passed recently, and my wife was like, "You're really upset," and I was like, "Yeah, I am." George Perez. Through a lot of he's probably one of the greats of all time, but yeah, he was my guy. He's my favorite comic artist. He passed away from cancer about a month and a half ago. But yeah, I really love all the way through Invasion of Time. Absolutely love most all of it. There are stories that I'm like, it's not as good. I think Robot is weird because it's not really a Tom Baker story.
I love Robot, and I'll give you my Robot story if you want.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, like I said, I got started with Davison, Arc of Infinity, Season 20, watching 25 minutes a night. By the time Enlightenment Part 1 showed up in that cliffhanger, I was convinced this was my favorite show. I've been watching it for 2 weeks. It was my favorite show now. So we loop all the way around to the end. I figured out later that I turned on Time Flight. It was November 23rd, 1984. There's a website called Broadcast with DW in the middle, and it gives you the history of Doctor Who airing on all the PBS stations in the U.S.
Oh, you need to send me that link. I need to.
From that, I was able to reverse engineer that Time Flight Part 1 would have aired on November 23rd. Coincidence. I didn't even know that was the anniversary. So Caves of Androzani airs the last week of January, and we had another PBS station on Channel 20 out of Boston, WSBK. So one of my friends had been watching ahead and knew that the regeneration was coming in the story with the man who wore the black and white mask. So once Shara's Jex shows up in Part 1 of Androzani, I knew this is it. So Friday night, Part 4, I was hooked. I was ready for this. I was so jazzed and excited by the regeneration that I literally fell down the stairs coming out of the room because I was just floating on cloud 9. Not one of my more proud moments. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking that we were going to get Colin Baker the following Monday evening. Of course, what I didn't know is this is January 1985. Colin Baker has barely started to air in the UK. So they didn't even have – they did not buy Twin Dilemma. They went directly back to Robot. So all of a sudden we're back in 1974, and the credits are a lot more low-tech. And there's John Pertwee regenerating into Tom Baker. So
at this point, you know what the doctors are, the different doctors.
I'd seen the 5 doctors, and
okay.
I had just gotten my first spate of novelizations a week earlier, so I'd already read Invasion of Time and Destiny of the Daleks at this point. So I am watching – again, I'm 11 years old, just past 11, and Tom Baker in Part 1 of Robot was about the funniest thing I'd ever seen because he's clowning around, he's got the costumes.
It's a great scene.
And as upset as I was when Pierce Brosnan left James Bond, and then 10 minutes into Casino Royale, Pierce who?
Yeah.
It was the same. Peter Davison made me a fan. Once I got those first 10 minutes of Tom Baker and Robot, Tom was all of a sudden my new favorite. So Peter made me a fan. Tom is the reason I stayed a fan. But for reasons I will never understand, my parents insisted that we all leave the house together to go to the public library. So I had to VHS tape the last 10 minutes of Robot, otherwise I was going to miss it. Next morning, I wake up with 102 fever, had the flu, ended up missing the next 3 days of school, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. I was lying debilitated on the floor of the den, and all I could do was watch those 10 minutes, the last 10 minutes of Robot Part 1 over and over again. I could probably, if I gave it a thought, I could probably recite those 10 minutes in a row because that's how many times I watched it that day. The TV was set to Nickelodeon because my sister was watching Pinwheel. Remember Pinwheel in the morning?
Yeah.
And I would watch my 10 minutes of Robot, rewind the tape, and there's Bill Cosby doing picture pages. Watch 10 minutes of Robot, rewind. There's Bill Cosby doing another picture page with you. That story didn't age well.
No.
So then Tuesday night, Robot Part 2. Wednesday night, Robot Part 3. Friday morning, I'm recovered, go back to school. We go out to dinner that night. I come home, and I put on Ark in Space Part 1. You go from Robot, where Tom Baker is funny and clownish, all of a sudden now it's the Hinchcliffe Holmes years. And, of course, I wouldn't have known this at the time. And Tom Baker's first lines in Ark in Space are, "You're a clumsy, ham-fisted idiot." Totally different character. And then he goes into the room with all the cryogenic bodies, and he gives his,
that's my first Doctor Who.
What an inventive, invincible species. They're indomitable. That speech, raised the hairs on the back of my neck.
No.
So that 1 week, watching Robot Part 1 over and over again, and then finishing with Ark Space, that is probably the best week of television that I've ever had, not counting some episodes of Better Call Saul. Yeah. That was an amazing week, and I will never, ever hear a bad word about Tom Baker after that. And
yeah.
It took about 9 months for PBS to cycle through to the end. So if they started,
there's a boatload. It's a lot.
Yeah. If you start Robot in February and you're doing one episode a night, it takes you until about October or November to hit Legolas.
That's the smallest drip of it I've ever heard a story, because Baltimore we got an hour. So the first one I ever saw was my brother had told me about it, and my brother he gave me my first comic book. He gave me these. I'm a big fan of Philip Jose Farmer's Riverworld novels, because like my 12th birthday, he gave me all the books, and I devoured them. So I trust him, because he turned me. I mean, a lot of the time he was turning me on to stuff, so I'd leave him alone. Go read this comic book, leave me alone. I want to get high. Right. You're bugging me, which is fine. But he told me about it, and I was like, yeah. And I missed Robot. And I watched Ark in Space, and I fell in love with all of them. I was like 13 years old, 12 or 13 years old. And Sarah Jane is, Elizabeth Sladen's beautiful. And she's smart, and she's strong, and she's a very, you didn't see that kind of character. You didn't see that kind of character in a lot of Who after, I think she and Louise Jameson are a bit more fully fleshed out characters than some ones we'll see later on. And that's not the actor's fault. That's being let down by production. But Liz Sladen is such a good actress. And I really loved it. And I liked Tom. I really did. And I liked that era. And I still love, I will badmouth Tom, because it's not because I don't like him. It's just because I'm sick of him. There is this thing about he's the best. I had the same thing with David Tennant. There's so much Tennant love sometimes. I'm like, I don't want to watch it, because all you guys talk about is Tennant. Stop it. There are 14 others. I really love every Doctor. I find there's something good in every era of Doctor Who. There's something entertaining. If I don't like all of them, that's no big deal, but I think every actor has done their best, and I have my favorites, but I'm not fixated on my favorites. I'm not watching Matt Smith in a loop. But I got a little Tom Baker overload.
The thing is, no matter what Tom Baker story I watch, I am always mesmerized by him in a way that I was never mesmerized by David Tennant. I am lukewarm on Tennant. There are some good stories. There are some bad stories. I'm not a fan of the whole Time Lord Victorious thing, and I find him over the top at times. No matter what Tom Baker era I'm watching, the Hinchcliffe era where he is alien and mysterious, or the Graham Williams era where he's taken over the show and driving the poor producer to drink, or the Bidmead year when he has reinvented the character and is older and tired. I love all three of those eras, and I enjoy all of his performances in a way that you don't get with David Tennant.
Yeah.
But circling back to Sarah Jane for a moment, do you ever notice that the way they used her is completely different to the way that every companion before her ever got used? Because before that, companions were there to anchor subplots. Liz Shaw and the Third Doctor, as great a team as they are hardly ever on screen at the same time.
You send the companion goes off on a separate adventure, and which is a lot of what they do in Modern Who. That's the formula in Modern Who.
But it doesn't happen with Sarah Jane. No. She and the Doctor are almost always side by, especially after Harry leaves. She becomes the Tom Baker to English translator. If you look at Seeds of Doom, she is by his side almost every minute of all 6 parts, and she interprets him for the other characters.
Without becoming just a puppet.
No, they are completely equals. They finish each other's sentences. She makes fun of him. They complete each other's jokes.
Oh, yeah.
You don't get that with almost any until Romana 2 comes along. Those are the only 2 companions that are equal to the Doctor.
I find Romana 2 to be a little bit of a pill. I do like her. I find her when I get back to him. It's the same thing with Baker. When I get back to Baker, I'm like, oh, this is a great one. Oh, this is a great one. Oh, this is like, I love Planet of Evil. I love Planet of Evil. People make fun of it. I'm like, I don't care. That's a great set. That's a great set. The costumes, puffy shoulders. What the fuck is that? I mean, come on. That's just, it's just. But it's then again, I'm a Star Trek fan. I watch Next Gen. It's like, why are they wearing upholstery? Why are their clothes made out of Granny's sofa? How hot is that? Future garb. It's why when Battlestar came back and Ron Moore said, "Fucking, they're gonna wear coats and ties."
Yep.
Because guess what? Men have worn coats and ties for hundreds and hundreds of years. They just look a little different. So, but no, I agree. Then I think it is. I'm a huge Harry fan. I do think them as they're a great triple act. I think Harry is the perfect foil for both of them. So you can team the Doctor up with Harry while Sarah, because Sarah drives a lot of the plot in Genesis.
Mm-hmm.
For half that story, she's having her own adventure, and she is carrying that show, those episodes. So I think it's great. I have had to go back and reevaluate. During COVID, I restarted my great rewatch, and I was in the middle of I was at Colony of Space. And I breezed through the per week, and I don't know why I got stuck on Colonies of Space, because it's not one of my favorites, but I do like it. There are certain ones where I get to it and it's like, I can't watch that. Twin Dilemma, it's like, I can't watch that. I have to have my mind in the right place to watch it. But I breezed through it, and I was going through these, and I really reevaluated, and Jeff is a huge fan of season 18. The Bidmead years, and he came up recently with a new term. It's mathemagical. Yeah, and I think he's right, because it's a little more hard science fiction. Every story, except for I do not like State of Decay. I have stage managed better drag shows than those 3 vampires. They're fucking horrible. They're terrible. It is all on the director. They're all over the place. It's just, it tweaks me. But I like the rebellion, the old guys in the caves listening on the radio. I love that stuff. It's just the minute those guys come out and it's like bad drunken Mardi Gras. Just
stick to the novelization. Terrence Dix is writing his own script. He gets rid of all the Peter Moffat stuff, and he's doing his own directing of the novelization, and it's way better.
I'm gonna have to reread it because I don't remember that. Because it's been so long since I read that one, and I really disliked that one so much I probably kind of breezed through the novelization. But I really, it's up until I'm not the biggest fan of the Graham Williams years, but I've gone back with I did watch season 17 with Jeff. And we were both surprised when we did our top number 1 of the season. It was Creature in the Pit. We were both like, wow. And
That's
that came from
a very underrated, a very misunderstood story. Very misunderstood.
It is very funny. It's a little camp. There's some little bit of stuff that's a little questionable, and it's funny as hell. Because it's really, the phallus, all that. It's just funny. I'm not the biggest Douglas Adams fan. I understand why people love City of Death. It just doesn't. It's not something that, it's kind of like, okay. I'd rather watch The Pirate Planet. I prefer, I like The Pirate Planet better. Because I like the captain, and when he screams "Fibuli," I love it. It's over the top, almost variety. But
one of the few guest actors who could keep up with Tom Baker at that point in the program is Bruce Purchase. He gives a Tom Baker level performance, and the two of them meeting at the same level are glorious together in their big confrontation.
Oh God, it makes Tom pull back. Tom is he's a great actor in the way that he's like, this dude's funny. I'm giving him his moment to shine.
Exactly.
I'm giving him his moment because he's doing better. It's like Graham Croydon in Horns and Nymon. That story's a mess. It's a mess. It's all over the place. It is all over the place. But Graham Croydon is hysterical, and I don't care. I don't care. They look when I watched that on the Blu-ray, and that season's hard for me. But I enjoyed them more than I had in a long time, except for Nightmare on Eden. Nightmare on Eden really bothers me still, but it's Nightmare on Eden. There's a giant red button that says "Press Destruct" on it, and it's huge. It's on the wall, and the Blu-rays don't forgive anything, and I can see the gaff tape on the sets. It's just awful. And the Mandrells look like they're wearing flared pants like the Mandrell sisters.
Because they literally are. Yeah, it's literally the costume.
Oh yeah. But is there an era or a season that is your favorite of his?
So yeah, let's backtrack. So just to give a plug for Doctor Who literature, you gave a very nice plug for my show in the middle of your Mawdryn Undead episode with Vic, so I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. I love Mawdryn Undead.
I am in the middle. I love Mawdryn Undead too, and that's one of the best instrumental scores. Paddy Kingsland's hard rock guitar score is incredible.
Oh, it's really good. Me and Vic, the only thing that bugged us was the set was a little too 80s gay bar. There was a specific one in Richmond that I thought it looked like.
So, I am in the middle of the Hinchcliffe era on Doctor Who literature, right? So, last week was Ark in Space. That's the book number 32 in publication order. This week I am rereading Brain of Morbius.
Oh, cool.
And then next is going to be next week is I've completely blanked out. I'm recording it in 2 days. Oh yeah, Brain of Morbius is this week. After that is Planet of Evil. And then 2 weeks after that is Deadly Assassin. So I'm on a season 13, season 14 run. I had Sadie Miller on my show about a month ago talking about Pyramids of Mars. And then, in the most lucky moment of my life, I was able to get Philip Hinchcliffe to talk about the Seeds of Doom novelization.
Ooh.
And then
I'm playing catch up. I'm so far behind on shit. I do 4 podcasts a week now.
Yeah, I am in a 2-month backlog. I just earlier today, coming back from the office, heard you and Jeff talking about season 21. So that's where I am.
Oh my God.
In mid-April in my podcast. But yeah, I had Sadie Miller on, I had Philip Hinchcliffe, and then I covered Ark in Space, so talking about the late Ian Marter's first novelization.
His novels
which is
are
great
wonderful.
Because he fixes a lot of the minor logic problems with the TV story and all the sexist lines that Harry gets on TV, and there's a lot of them. Ian Marter cuts them all right out, so they're not in the novelization, so I appreciate that. So in other words, I am in a big Philip Hinchcliffe era groove right now because that's where the books are. And then I've got Mask of Mandragora, the novelization, coming up in another 6 weeks, and I'll have on another couple of guests who are very relevant to Mask of Mandragora. So that's where I am in terms of my podcasting at this moment. I am in a Philip Hinchcliffe mood, having just gotten to speak to the man. However, I will say that last year when I was in the Tom Baker portion of my pilgrimage, right now I'm at the very end of Matt Smith. My next episode to watch is going to be The Time of the Doctor.
Okay.
So I'll be starting Capaldi soon. But in last year when I was doing Tom Baker and the pilgrimage was going by a lot faster, the second you get from Har of Fang Rock, which is one of my top 10 all time. Another great Terrence Dicks script.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite Doctor Who's period. It's
But then
perfect.
the very next story after that is Invisible Enemy, and all of a sudden you realize Graham Williams is not, and I hesitate to speak ill of the dead, Graham Williams was not the man for that moment. Invisible Enemy is a mess in every sense of the word, and
It's
that's the
all
moment.
oh God, I've been making we haven't even covered it yet, and I've badmouthed it 1,000 times because the fucking prawn. It's a prawn, and it's a Brad. It's like a third grade costume of a small prawn.
That's not even what bothers me the most. From that moment on, Tom Baker spends 60% of the next 3 years fondling the TARDIS console. That's all he does in the console room. It's silly, and there was nobody there to call him out on it until Christopher Bidmead and JNT take over in 1980. So it's where things get silly. And part 4 of Invisible Enemy makes no sense because they ran out of time. All of a sudden, you have directors who are far below the quality of director that Philip
And they
Hitchcock
can't
was
control
getting.
him. And he
All the
doesn't have
great
any respect for
directors,
them.
right? All the great directors leave season 13 and 14. End of Douglas Camfield, season 13. End of David Maloney, season 14. It all goes away. So you have guys who come in for one story only, can't manage Tom Baker, leave, and never direct a story again. So you have again, some of these are better than others, but Ken Grieve does one story. Kenny McBain does one story. Norman Stewart does 2 stories, and they're terrible.
Which ones did he do? Underworld and...
I've forgotten the other one.
See, I love Image of Fendal. I think that's an underrated story.
I feel that's a little overrated, but I do acknowledge that it's better than some of the stuff that comes
And
around
I like
it.
the Sunmakers, because I like Robert Holmes.
Yeah, but after that you have Underworld, which is another story where the rails
Jesus.
Part 1 is good, but the rails completely fall off. Again, it's bad directing. And nobody's
they don't have
controlling
they
Tom
can't
Baker.
build a set, so they have to use CSO for everything. And it's a disaster.
So Graham Williams' first year is a mess, and if you're watching in sequence, you have 5 amazing years of Letts and Dicks, 3 amazing years of Hinchcliffe and Holmes. All of a sudden, now you have Graham Williams cannot control the rudder, and the ship's just falling apart. But then he bounces back, because the Key to Time season is terrific. Then season 17...
most of it is really good. It's not my favorite, and some of the stories aren't as good. I love Androids of Terra. I love the Ribos Operation, and I really, really love the Ribos Operation. Everybody is so freaking good in it, and I really love Mary Tamsin Romana.
One of the most... All those Robert Holmes stories are endlessly quotable. Like, I'm in the middle of Brain of Morbius right now, so just one quote after another. But Rebus Operation has so many good quotes, so many good moments.
Oh yeah, and when Tom has a good script, you don't need to control him. You know what I mean?
Right. I'll give you an example. In part 3, he and Garen and Romana are locked up in a room, and they're just talking. And Romana's like, "We have to leave. We have to leave." And the doctor says, when you've been locked up as often as I have, this is much more enjoyable. And he and Garen are just telling war stories about selling the Sydney Harbor Bridge. And this is where Tom Baker just relaxes, and he lets a really good guest actor, Ian Cuthbertson, take over. And I could watch that scene, and nothing to do with the story, but I could watch that one scene over and over again.
Yeah. It's when he's given...
The Scringe Stone scene is incredible. I could watch that over and over again.
I'm a big Marx Brothers fan, and there's a little bit of that, the con men. You know, it's like an old 30s movie in a way. I love it. I think for the most part that's a great season. I think Armageddon Factor needs a trim. But I think Stones of Blood is fun. I love Androids of Terror. It's kind of like the what's the Dumas story? Count of Monte Cristo. I kind of like those kind of stories, and I think she's really good in it. I think they give Mary Tam some more stuff to do, and then I think season 17 is rough as hell. That's where Graham is just like, I'm out of here. I can't, and Tom is just hamming it up. If it wasn't for like Creatures in the Pit and City of Death, even though it's not one of my favorites. That season's really rough. The wheels are off the cart. And
But let me give you a counterexample. Part 4 of Creature from the Pit. One of the reasons I love that story so much. the Doctor and Romana are having this exposition scene in Lady Adrasta's castle after Lady Adrasta has died, and now they're pivoting to the real threat, which is this neutron star that Arato has called to destroy the planet. And they have this conversation, and all Tom Baker does is say yes over and over and over again. And then Romana starts doing it, and it becomes literally a love scene between the two of them, just saying yes to each other. And it is clearly written by Douglas Adams, not David Fisher, because it is not in the David Fisher novelization.
Okay.
But it's an incredible scene because the two of them, it's their first time out together. They have incredible chemistry. They're almost making out in the dialogue. And even just using the word yes, just this one word, the two of them manage to say it so many times that it becomes a work of art. And this is where Tom Baker reins himself in and just does darn good drama because he has a really good co-star across from him.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and that's what I mean, I will be grumpy, and as my wife calls it, grumpus about Tom Baker. It's like, I don't want to watch Tom Baker, but every time I watch one, for the most part, I'm entertained. And sometimes I'm entertained because he is all over the place. I want to watch the car. I want to watch the accident. You know, it's entertaining. I think his final season is a great season. I think it's an incredibly good season. I think it's almost as strong as Hinchcliffe Holmes, because every story, and that was something Jeff said, you need to reevaluate it. And when it came out on Blu-ray, I sat down and watched it very carefully and went, man, this stuff's way better than I remember it. I think when I had first seen it, it was tainted by some of the previous season, you know, because I don't think there's, other than the State of Decay, which I don't like, I think all the stories are really good. Meglos is good. It's got good elements. I think Bidmead is a good script editor. I think he's an underrated script editor.
He's a terrific script editor. He was able to salvage. If you go back, I heard Stephen Gallagher speak at Gallifrey 1 in Los Angeles earlier this year, and he was talking about his respective experiences being script edited by Bidmead and then Sayward. So he wrote his own novelization of Warrior's Gate, and JNT famously rejected it, saying it was too far removed from the TV story. So Gallagher had to rewrite it to bring it in line. He had to novelize, the transmission script rather than his original draft. Then they go back and they resurrect his original draft, and they put that on audio, narrated by John Culshaw. Probably came out about 3 or 4 years ago. If you listen to the original audio novelization of Warrior's Gate, the pre-Bidmead draft, all the best parts about Warrior's Gate are not in it. The whole banquet scene, that was Bidmead, that came in later. And Stephen Gallagher says he considers Warrior's Gate his story, even though he only wrote a fraction of the dialogue that made it to TV, because all the beats that he plotted were there, and Bidmead just made them better. Then, of course, you talk about Terminus, and he is much, much, much less flattering of Eric Sayward.
Yeah, well.
But Bidmead has had this ability to take a good script and add the science and just make it better. And Logopolis is my all-time favorite. I don't care what anybody says. I know Logopolis has its critics. I think his writing, and especially the novelization of Logopolis, it is poetry in motion.
Did he write Leisure Hive?
He wrote large chunks of it.
Okay.
David Fisher had another one of his jokey sub-Douglas Adams-esque scripts.
Uh-huh.
And Bidmead puts in all the stuff about tachyonics. So then you have Lovett Bickford directing, and Leisure Hive, as transmitted, is much better than the David Fisher version, which you can get in the novelization, which is a little wearying in its Douglas Adams-esque humor, page after page after page of it.
I really liked the last time I went through Leisure Hive. Really hit me. I'm starting to fade, so let's wrap this. I've like I said, I've been saying it over and over again. I've reevaluated. I enjoy Tom Baker. And I understand why he is so incredibly popular and why he means so much to American fans. Because if you're of a certain age, our ages, he was your first. For the most part, most people, he was their first Doctor. Yep. And he was the Doctor the longest. I mean, it's 7 years is a little long to be in the part. You know. But, and for anybody, any part, I really don't think anybody should do something that long, you know. But I enjoyed it, and I've really come to love him at Big Finish. I did not get a lot of his stuff because I've had this, I don't want to like Tom. It's everybody likes him. I don't want to be the cool kids all like him, just being an idiot.
Right.
But I've really enjoyed a lot of them. The stuff he has done, they did some stuff with him, and he had a companion, Anna, who ends up being the niece or the cousin of Sarah Kingdom, and she's a double agent, and
Right.
it was great. It was great. And then they used her in a David Tennant Big Finish, which I really loved, using some of the characters from Terry Nation's Not Survivors, Destroyers.
Right.
Yeah. And Tom's a joy in him. He's a joy in him. And I think he is mellowed, and when you see him interviewed, it's really nice, because he kind of goes, I know when he kind of says, yeah, I was a bit of a dick. You know, I think everybody, when you get to a certain age, you kind of look back and go, yeah, I was a bit of an asshole. Sorry. You know.
Yeah, he did wrong by Graham Williams. He did wrong by Louise Jameson, but he apologized. He made his amends, and now he appreciates them a lot more than he did back in the 70s.
Yeah, because he's yeah. I think he married his wife. Kind of told him, you're not. I get that impression that he found the right partner who said, you're a really good guy, but you've done some shitty things and you need to apologize to him.
Yeah.
So, but I've enjoyed that stuff. I enjoy him being an ambassador for the program. He was when he was talking on one of the last Blu-ray box set, he said some very nice things, and he was very, very introspective, and it was very nice to see. I do love those sets for those interviews. I like that was one that you don't see the interviewer. It's just you just see the answers, because it's Tom.
Right.
It was very sweet. But, I understand why he's so great.
I think what I appreciate most about him is that in his final role, after he's leaving the show, even in season 7, he is giving very nuanced and deep and enjoyable performances. He didn't go out on a low note. Imagine if our last memory of him is if he regenerates in the middle of part 4 of Nightmare of Eden. My arms, my fingers, my everything. Oh, hi, I'm Peter Davison.
Oh, my God.
He got to go out with a bunch of somber performances, reinventing the role at the very last minute in a darker costume. And that was when he started to get sick, so he's physically frail in some of those episodes, which really adds to the ambience. And I think he is as good in Full Circle, where he's auditioning half a dozen teenage companions at once.
Oh, he's really good in these. He's so good. He's so good in Meglos, playing the baddie, and he's great in Warrior's Gate when he's talking to the pirates.
And it's trendy to bash Matthew Waterhouse for 40 years of perceived slights.
I've had to reevaluate him, and listening to him talk about the show, and just him kind of go, I was 18. What did you expect?
I refuse to badmouth an 18-year-old actor who is learning the job as he goes. The performance that he gives opposite Tom Baker in Keeper of Traken and the first half of Legopolis, they work
they're
really
well
good
together. They're incredibly good together, and
they have great chemistry.
Tom is letting him shine. He's giving this kid an opportunity.
He was unusually generous.
The kids, he's treating him as a professional. I don't think Davison and his group treated him as well. I think Tom was very like, this is a kid, I'm going to help him. Someone help me, and I appreciate that. And in theater, it's kind of how you get around in the world. Someone did, someone did you a solid, and you pass it on to somebody else. So I agree with you on that. That's and I actually like that. I like the first season of Peter Davison. I got a great deal. I do have a problem with Eric Sayward.
Oh, I've got a lot of problems with Sayward and his violent misogyny, and it gets a lot worse. I just heard you and Jeff talking about Twin Dilemma, and for you it was 2.5 months ago. For me it was 3 hours ago. That's how far behind I am. But everything you guys say about Twin Dilemma is
fucking awful. There should have been someone who'd been screaming that, what are you doing?
Yeah.
It was terrible. It was awful. It's upsetting. And it's also, and it's a fucking terrible story.
Mr. Darcy doesn't try to strangle Elizabeth in Chapter 4 of Pride and Prejudice, so why is he trying to strangle Perry in story terms half an hour after he sacrificed himself to save her life?
It makes
Nobody
no
thought
sense.
This was a bad idea.
Oh, no, it's just, it's that thing me and Vic talk about. Was there no one in the writer's room, in the room when they were talking through scripts, raise their hand and went, this is stupid. This isn't, you're not making Cranky. If you want, like, how they did Capaldi, he's disagreeable. The worst you're going to do is make a disagreeable doctor. Not an evil
Yeah,
doctor.
Capaldi's doing Hinchcliffe a lot more than he is doing Eric Sayward. I think he's more early 4 than he is early 6.
I think he's a little. I think if you wrote Hartnell, if Hinchcliffe and Holmes did Hartnell, he's a little
That's
bit
a
like
really
that.
good point.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, folks, that's Tom Baker. Thank you, Jason, for coming on. I appreciate it. I enjoy when I'm on. I know the other day you told me what my next 2 novels to read are, and I will get started.
You've got 2 books in the next 4 months for me, so I'm very excited to have you on.
Yeah, and they're ones that I really wouldn't have. They're stories that I kind of want to reread because, they're not ones that I would have gone for. I just, I like that you've given me 2 that I wouldn't have thought of doing. So I'm kind of looking forward to that.
One of them is a Pinnacle. Pinnacle is responsible in part for the spread of Tom Baker in the States.
Oh God,
so we got to talk
had
about
a full
Pinnacle
set
books.
because my brother gave me a complete set of the Pinnacles when I was a kid, and I do like some of the Pinnacle covers. So, but where can people see you or hear you on the interwebs?
I am the solo host of Doctor Who Literature, but I have a different guest on every week. I've had you on twice, and I will have you on twice more.
Mm-hmm.
You were with me on the 10th Planet, and you were with me on, help me out here, what was the second one?
Curse of Peladon.
That's right, Curse of Peladon was your
first
first one.
I got to listen to David. I read it and I listened to David Trout and read it. It was wonderful.
So I have had several guests on. My Philip Hinchcliffe episode is episode 29. My John Peel episode is episode 30. Those are terrific interviews. But I have a lot of fans on too, and a lot of them are people who have come through your show. I've had Mark on, I've had Simon, I've had Fraser. So if you've been on Gallifrey's Most Wanted, you've probably been on Doctor Who Literature as well. I am also at this point, a co-host, co-producer of the Trap One podcast. Mark was in New York City this past week, so I got to have some time with him and his
cool.
wife.
He told me that because I had asked him to come on and talk more comics, and he said he was gonna see Daniel Craig play Macbeth. I was like, cool.
Oh yes, he sent me some video of Daniel Craig exiting the theater the other day. Very exciting. So yeah, we took a photo of the 2 of us in Times Square with the Trap One emblem on one of the Times Square billboards. So Trap One owned Times Square for a few minutes.
Oh, very cool.
A few days ago. You can see that photo on Twitter. I am on Twitter at Doctor Who Novels, Dr. Who Novels. You can find Doctor Who Literature on Anchor, which is a division of Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts, or your catcher of choice. And if you hashtag Dr. Who Pilgrimage, Doctor Who Pilgrimage on Twitter, you can get all my thoughts about my ongoing rewatch. The next episode I watch will be Time of the Doctor. And then it'll be Peter Capaldi, and then it'll be time for the Centenary and the final Jodie Whittaker, which is coming up probably in about a little less than 3 months.
Yeah. Wow. And then, all the stuff that's going on, the little, I'm following it, kind of like, don't show me too much, but it's Davies. Davies doesn't give a shit. Just film outside. So,
Doogie Howser is coming to the Doctor Who universe, and we all know who he's playing, and that's going to be pretty fun.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I love Neil Patrick Harris. Ever since he started to make fun of himself in Harold and Kumar. But folks, you can find more of us. I will be back next week with Victoria, and we will be doing, it's a Capaldi one with the trees all grow.
Oh, In the Forest of the Night?
Yes. That's not one of my favorite seasons, but so you'll listen to me piss and moan about it. And then I'll be off for a couple weeks, so I'll be jumping around, having guests on. But you can find us on the interweb at Gallifrey's MW Pod or at the Runcible Report. And folks, if you're into comic books, please check out my comic book podcast, Stop, Let's Team Up. I do 3 episodes a week, Legion of Superheroes episode, a Defenders episode, and then a random team up or team book episode. So please check me out on that. All right, and until then, I look forward to seeing you somewhere in time or space.